Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. "50 days of the Israel-Hamas war, guess who has officially entered the picture? China. Top players in West Asia and representatives of Muslim nations are meeting in Beijing. We'll tell you what they're up to. Meanwhile, Iran-backed Houthis have seized a cargo ship in the Red Sea and the Pentagon is divided over America's response as their troops keep coming under attack. So will the US join this war? We'll discuss that. Also, the biggest headline in the tech world, the sacking of OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. It caused an earthquake of sorts. He's now been hired by Microsoft and his replacement has been named. We'll get you the inside story. Has India become a $4 trillion economy? We'll answer that question for you. Who is Argentina's new president and why are his neighbors already upset? How is Mali's ruling junta using football tickets to influence people? What's happening in Myanmar and why are the Rohingya leaving Bangladesh again? What does climate change have to do with the class divide? A new study throws up stunning numbers. And India's World Cup story, so close yet so far. There's a lot to unpack tonight. The headlines first. The US Defense Secretary makes an unannounced visit to Kiev. Lloyd Austin's trip is aimed at reassuring Ukraine of America's support. This is Austin's second visit since the Ukraine war began. At $40 billion and counting, the US is Ukraine's biggest donor of military aid. South Korea sends a warning to the North, scrap your spy satellite launch plans or face quote-unquote necessary measures. North Korea is preparing to launch a spy satellite for the third time this year. Both its previous attempts ended in failure. Taiwan's presidential frontrunner picks a former US envoy as a running mate. William Lai is the frontrunner in the January 2024 election. The polls come at a time when China is looking to exert greater control over Taiwan. Both Lai and his running mate are despised by Beijing. In India, a massive fire broke out at a harbour in Visakhapatnam. Around 40 fishing boats were gutted. The loss is estimated to be over $500,000. Fishermen suspect criminals set the boats on fire. Nigeria's Football Federation wants to fire their coach but can't. That's because they do not have enough money to pay him off. Nigeria's qualification for the 2026 World Cup is in serious jeopardy. Coach Jose Peseiro is being blamed for the poor performance. And Shakira reaches a deal to settle her tax fraud case in Spain. The Colombian superstar will have to pay a fine of nearly $8 million. With this deal, Shakira has managed to avoid a trial and a possible jail sentence. It's official. China is entering the Gaza conflict. Today, Beijing held a meeting. It hosted major regional players from West Asia. This is China trying to play mediator. It's an important mission and Beijing has entrusted its top diplomat, Wang Yi, to pull it off.
We have been working hard to de-escalate the conflict, protect the safety of civilians, expand humanitarian assistance, and the prevention of a humanitarian disaster. We call for a return to the two-state solution and the early realization of a comprehensive, just, and lasting settlement to the Palestine issue.
China is calling for an end to this war, echoing the sentiments of the regional players. But this is not just about ending the war. There is more to China's plan. A bigger shift is underway, where America is losing ground to China. So this war is an opportunity for Beijing to deepen its influence in West Asia and to put the Americans on the back foot. Let me explain how. Starting with what we know about today's meeting. China is hosting key regional players in Muslim countries. The agenda? The Israel-Hamas war. They're exploring the possibility of a ceasefire. Among the attendees are Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Indonesia, and the Palestinian National Authority, the de facto government of Palestine. Also present is the head of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Its members, in fact, are 57 Islamic countries. So you see the kind of representation. All of them have sent their top officials to China for a 2-day meeting. The idea is to build pressure on Israel. The goal is to end the hostilities, Today was the first day of discussions, and they set the tone right away. They demanded an immediate ceasefire. Saudi Arabia's foreign minister made some scathing comments. Listen to this.
We are still facing serious developments and a serious humanitarian crisis, a humanitarian disaster rather, that requires effective international action to address it and confront it, including the ongoing violations by Israeli forces.
The Arab world is once again firmly positioned against Israel, and they want China's support. Consider what Egypt's foreign minister said today. He wants a quote-unquote stronger role for China. His name is Sameh Shukri. He also said, and I'm quoting again, unfortunately, there are major countries that give cover to the current Israeli attacks. No prizes for guessing who this is aimed at. Israel's partners in the West, particularly the United States of America. They've supported Israel's war. And in the process, they've further alienated their allies in West Asia. Take Saudi Arabia, for instance, one of the most important regional players. This is what their crown prince said last week.
We condemn the military aggression witnessed in the Gaza Strip. We stress the need to stop this war and force displacement, as well as to create conditions for the return of stability and for achieving peace.
This was at the Islamic Arab Summit, where they couldn't agree about the next course of action. Iran wanted to arm anti-Israel groups like Hamas. It wanted an oil embargo on Israel. The others, including Saudi Arabia, rejected these proposals. But they must be seen as critical of Israel. So Crown Prince MBS has called Netanyahu's war barbaric. Riyadh has joined other stakeholders to build this pressure campaign, and they want China to support it. And this is right up Beijing's alley. They were just waiting for an assignment like this. Earlier this year, China brokered a truce between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The two nations normalized ties after 7 years. It was quite a big deal. And last month, China launched a diplomatic mission. A special envoy was dispatched to the region. He made multiple stops to reinforce Beijing's position, to get a foot in the door. And now finally, the Chinese have a chance.
We are ready to continue to make unremitting efforts together with the vast number of Arab and Islamic countries to push for an early ceasefire and war ending in Gaza.
How should this be seen then? As a setback for the US for sure. Its clout in the region is shrinking, and Washington is cognizant of this. Last week, when Xi Jinping met Joe Biden, the Americans made a request. They asked China to speak to Iran and to quote-unquote use its influence to avoid a wider regional conflict. So America's limitations are becoming evident. Even before this war began, they were losing ground to China. The conflict will only precipitate the shift. Give China more opportunities to engage and extend its influence. It may or may not be successful in hammering a truce, but one thing is quite clear. West Asian powers do not trust America with the job anymore. So Arab states are getting impatient, and with good reason, because the war is coming to their doorstep. It's threatening regional peace and trade. Let me tell you how. A cargo ship has been seized in the Red Sea. The ship is called Galaxy Leader. It was sailing from Turkey to India. Yesterday, it was passing through the Red Sea. That's when the hijackers struck. And we're not talking about pirates or bounty hunters. This was done by the Houthi rebels. We've talked about them before. The Houthis are a Shia armed group in Yemen. They're currently fighting a civil war. Most of their weapons and funds come from Iran. Basically, they are an Iranian proxy. And last month, the Houthis declared war on Israel. Even the hijacking is linked to that declaration because the Houthis say the ship is Israeli.
The naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces, with the help of Allah the Almighty, carried out a military operation in the Red Sea, resulting in the seizure of an Israeli ship and escorted it to the Yemeni coast. The Yemeni armed forces deal with the ship's crew in accordance with the teachings and values of our Islamic religion.
But Israel disagrees. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has released a statement. He says no Israeli national is on board the ship. So why did the Houthis target it? Well, let me introduce you to the murky world of global shipping. It's hard to say who controls a vessel. It's often registered in one country, run by another country, and owned by yet another country. Just consider this hijacked vessel. It is owned by a British firm, operated by the Japanese, and registered in the Bahamas. So, how does Israel feature in this equation? The ship's owners are reportedly linked to Abraham Rami Ungar. He's an Israeli businessman, also one of the richest people in the country. Maybe that explains why the ship was targeted. All the stakeholders have raised concerns about this incident. They want the crew to be released.
船員に日本人は含まれていないと報告を受けています。
The government firmly condemns this kind of incident. Currently, ministries and agencies, including the Transport Ministry and the Foreign Ministry, are gathering information and working with the relevant countries for the early release of the vessel and its crew.
解放のため取り組んでいるところであります。
This goes beyond just one vessel, though. The Red Sea is a key shipping route. More than 10% of global trade passes through here. What happens if this route becomes risky? If Houthis hijack more vessels? We could be looking at major supply issues. Oil prices could rise dramatically, which means other countries will have to respond, maybe with escort vessels or by deploying warships in the Red Sea. Which brings us to the United States. They've long policed the waters around West Asia, but right now the US is confused, especially the Pentagon. Their problem seems to be Iranian proxies like the Houthis. Many of them have been striking American assets. Some 60 attacks, 60 attacks have been reported since October. That's almost one attack per day. And how has President Joe Biden responded? With limited airstrikes, just 3 of them, all in eastern Syria. So some Pentagon officials are not happy. They say Biden's limited strategy is not working, that America should be more aggressive. If not, Iran will be emboldened. It's a tough call for Biden. If he escalates, he could get drawn into the war. If he doesn't, US troops could become sitting ducks. So what's his best option? Maybe end the war. Biden is yet to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. It's probably the only thing that will stop Israel's offensive. Their focus is still on the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. It was raided last week, remember. Israel says Hamas used Al-Shifa as a command base. They're releasing evidence to support their claim. Take a look at this. That was from October 7, the day Hamas attacked Israel. The video shows hostages being brought into Al-Shifa. 2 of them can be seen clearly. They appear to be injured. Now the Arab world says, so what? Where else would you take wounded people other than a hospital? But that's not the only evidence. The IDF claims to have found tunnels as well. One of them is around 55 meters long. It is located near the hospital complex. Take a look at this now. It's not just Al-Shifa though. Tanks have been spotted near another hospital, the Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza. A firefight has been reported there. At least 12 Palestinians have been killed so far. And outside the hospital, there is urban warfare. We're talking close-range combat. Israel has released footage of their men in action. It's almost like a video game. Like I said, it looks like a video game, but it's not a game though, is it? There are thousands of lives at stake here. Innocent civilians of Gaza, Israeli hostages, all of them are in grave danger. Is anyone working to rescue them? Well, there is diplomacy happening behind the scenes. Qatar and the US are brokering a deal. Hamas could release dozens of hostages. In return, Israel could agree to daily pauses in the fighting. Nothing's been signed so far, but Israel's US ambassador says he is hopeful.
We are hopeful that we can get a significant number of hostages freed in the coming days. I don't want to go into the details of these talks. They are obviously very sensitive. The less we go into the details, the better the chances of such a deal. But they are very serious efforts, and I'm hopeful that we can have a deal in the coming days.
So after nearly 50 days of fighting, diplomacy is coming through. Whether it's the Arab nations in China or Israel and Hamas in Qatar, the question is, will these talks be successful? The future of West Asia depends on it. Now let's talk about OpenAI and Sam Altman. If you haven't heard of them in the last 2 days, you've been living under a rock. This story is everywhere. OpenAI has sacked its CEO Sam Altman. The move has backfired, and how? Microsoft has hired Altman and he's poached his top team. All of this happened in the last 48 hours. It doesn't get more dramatic than this. So what exactly happened? And how will it impact the tech world? We'll break it down for you tonight and get you the inside story. First things first, what is OpenAI? It's the hottest Silicon Valley startup right now. Its value jumped from $29 billion this year. Currently, it's over $80 billion. And now this company is imploding. It is the organization behind ChatGPT, the most promising tech product in the last 1 year. This man led it, Sam Altman, co-founder, CEO, and of late a celebrity. Almost the face of the AI revolution. Last Friday, he was sacked from the company he founded. It was a bolt from the blue. No one saw it coming. His sacking was followed by mass exits. Investors panicked. 2 CEOs were named in 48 hours to replace him. And now the future of OpenAI is in jeopardy. So I come back to the question, what happened? For something as high-tech as AI, the story behind Altman's firing is as human as it gets. There was a rift. It led to a boardroom coup. Sam Altman had a falling out with his board of directors, 4 people in all. Ilya Sutskever, a chief scientist at OpenAI, Adam D'Angelo, the CEO of Quora, Tasha Macaulay, a technology entrepreneur, and Helen Toner, an academic. These were the board members. These are the board members. They sacked Sam Altman. But they don't hold any equity in the company, nor are they compensated. I know it sounds unusual. How can a board of directors with no financial interest wield so much power? Let me explain how. OpenAI is not structured like your usual corporation. It was started in 2015 as a non-profit. By 2018, they needed more money to build tools like ChatGPT, also to hire good talent. So they created a subsidiary, OpenAI Global LLC, a for-profit company, a subsidiary of OpenAI. And this subsidiary raised capital. Investors like Microsoft came on board. It also became a vehicle to attract talent. So this subsidiary brought in the money and it supported OpenAI's philanthropic vision. And this structure led to a divide. It caused all the drama over the weekend. The board felt that OpenAI was losing its way and that Sam Altman was losing focus. It was all about making money instead of tackling the risks posed by AI. They disagreed on the way forward. Reports say Altman wanted to create a new venture, a chip project, semiconductors that can run AI-based technologies. And he was meeting investors for this, planning to raise billions of dollars. Apparently, the board did not like it. There could have been some jealousy too.
Look, I think ultimately what ends up happening is that you start to have founders and CEOs that are bigger than the board, bigger than the company. And that's really what played out here in terms of with Altman, that became the face of AI global. And I think that's from the view of the White House to Wall Street to Silicon Valley.
They're yet to explain themselves. In the last 48 hours, the board has not said much, let alone explain their decision to sack Sam Altman. All they have said is this: Altman had not been, and I'm quoting, consistently candid in his communications. Well, the board's conduct doesn't scream candid either. They're facing a massive backlash. The dismissal was all hush-hush. The board did not tell anyone about it, not even the investors, and they're upset. The investors, they're upset. Like I said, Microsoft is a major investor. They put more than $10 billion in this company, OpenAI. Reports say the board blindsided Microsoft, and its CEO, Satya Nadella, was quote-unquote furious. After the sacking was announced, there was an outpouring of support for Sam Altman. From employees to investors, they all spoke up for him. The investors also tried to reinstate him. Altman shared this picture. He visited OpenAI offices as a guest. And here's what he said: "First and the last time I ever wear one of these." He was referring to his visitor's badge. So there were hectic negotiations. Sam Altman is said to have pushed for major changes to the board. Ultimately, they could not agree, and the drama took another turn. This afternoon, a new announcement was made. Microsoft has hired Sam Altman. He'll continue his work on AI, but with Microsoft now, and with a familiar research team, because many of his colleagues from OpenAI are jumping ship. They're joining Sam Altman at Microsoft. This list includes Greg Brockman. He was the president of OpenAI. Also 3 senior researchers, all poached by Microsoft. What about OpenAI? They've appointed a new interim CEO again. First, the board elevated someone from within, Meera Murati, OpenAI's chief technology officer. She was named interim CEO. But she barely lasted a day on the job. Emmett Shear has now replaced Meera Murati. He co-founded Twitch, the video streaming platform. He's promising an investigation into the recent events. Meanwhile, on social media, there's a flood of posts, mostly from employees at OpenAI. They say OpenAI is nothing without its people. And Sam Altman has been sharing these posts, possibly hinting at more departures in the near future. In fact, an OpenAI letter is going viral. It is from employees of the company addressed to the board. OpenAI has about 700 employees. 500 of them, more than 500 of them, have signed this letter. And what does it say? They want the board to step down. Else, the employees have threatened to leave the company. 500 out of its 700 employees. So the ship called OpenAI could be sinking, and sinking fast. And while Sam Altman's ouster came as a shock, it's not the first of its kind. It's typical of the tech world's Game of Thrones, really. Many founders have been booted from the companies they built. The list of famous victims is long and notable, like Steve Jobs of Apple, Jack Dorsey of Twitter, Travis Kalanick of Uber, Jerry Yang of Yahoo, Mike Lazardis of BlackBerry. All these founders were sacked from their own companies. So while the world of technology continues to advance at a breakneck pace, what remains constant are the boardroom battles, the corporate power play, and the office politics. Even AI has not been able to crack this one. Who would have thought? The pioneer of AI booted from his own company tells you no position is 100% safe, whether in business or in politics. Just ask the junta in Myanmar. In 2021, they toppled the democratically elected government. And since then, they've been invincible, crushing dissent, jailing the opposition, and driving out insurgents. But maybe not for long, because Myanmar's junta is facing an all-out civil war. It's like the Avengers of resistance. There are multiple ethnic insurgent armies, pro-democracy activists, and anti-junta politicians. All of them have banded together. They're taking the fight to the military regime. This weekend saw some of the most violent clashes in Myanmar. The insurgents say the army is dropping gas bombs on them, basically chemical weapons. Now, there is no proof to back this claim, but it's clear that the junta is spooked. Let me show you why. The fighting broke out late last month. It began in the northeastern state of Shan, but since then it has spread to the Chin state in the west, and the Kaya state in the east, and the Rakhine state also in the west. And the progress has been stunning. Entire military units have surrendered without a fight. Some reports say 50% of Myanmar is under rebel control. If true, that's a massive victory. But this success has come at a cost. that of civilians. Around 26,000 people have been displaced in the Rakhine state alone. Many have also fled to India.
My house was completely burnt down and was damaged. We've lost everything, but we want to go back to the village and construct a new house.
We have to fear this bombing. The peoples are running in the rivers, in the border. Yes, we have to fear, and this bomb is coming Sunday afternoon about 5:30 p.m.
So another refugee crisis, and I say another because Myanmar already has one. The Rohingya Muslims. They were persecuted and killed by the Myanmar junta. More than 1 million of them had to flee. Today, they are a people without a state. Bangladesh hosts around 900,000 of them, the Rohingyas. Pakistan, 350,000. Saudi Arabia, 200,000. India, 40,000. The UAE, 10,000. And Southeast Asia, around 150,000, out of which Malaysia is the largest host. Does the global community have a plan for the Rohingya? Not from the looks of it. Most of them stay in shelters or camps. Living conditions are horrible. Opportunities are few. And their future is bleak. So what do the refugees do? Many of them try to flee elsewhere. On Sunday, 500 Rohingya tried to land in Indonesia's Aceh province. It was the fifth such attempt in 1 week. Their voyages are fraught with risk. The boats are of poor quality, the weather can be bad, and the sea unforgiving. Yet, hundreds of Rohingya have made the journey. Most of them set sail from Bangladesh.
The Bangladesh government helped us by giving rations and food, but there is no security of life there. That's why we decided to come here, as Indonesia is a good Muslim country. We came here with our children, knowing that we might die or we might survive in our own way. We came with the hope that we can educate our children here.
Just one problem though, Indonesia doesn't seem to want them. You see, the Aceh province has its own history of violence. The locals understand what the Rohingya are going through. At the same time, there are concerns like how resources will be used up or how refugee camps could create social tension.
We did not mean to refuse them, but the place here is not conducive. The facilities are very limited. The community is hesitant to accept them because it's likely that the refugees will stay here for a long time, and the community is unable to provide logistics.
And that's the issue everywhere, the logistics, the resources, and of course the sentiments. Even India grappled with the same issues. Last year, there was talk of India deporting the Rohingya back to Myanmar. It triggered a lot of backlash. So in the end, the proposal was shelved. But clearly, this is not a long-term solution. The Rohingya deserve to live in their homeland, not in India, not in Bangladesh. That homeland is Myanmar. But what have Muslim nations done to achieve that? Statements at every summit. Beyond that, nothing. No lobbying at global organizations, no endless supplies of aid, at least not the kind that we are seeing for Gaza. It tells you what the priority is. The question is, will the current fighting help the Rohingya return eventually? I wouldn't count on it. Myanmar's last democratically elected leader was Aung San Suu Kyi, and she defended the Rohingya genocide at an international court. So don't hope for much. Moving on to India, on Sunday, a screenshot went viral on social media. And no, it wasn't about the Cricket World Cup, it was about India's economy. It claimed that India's GDP has crossed $4 trillion. Several media agencies picked it up. It was reposted by prominent personalities, including some ministers. But the government remained mum. The finance ministry did not comment on the claim. So is the Indian economy worth $4 trillion? Well, not yet. As of June 2023, the Indian economy is worth $3.75 trillion. We are the fifth largest economy in the world, so not $4 trillion yet, but very close. Our next report tells you how much time it could take India to reach the $4 trillion mark.
On November 19th, an unverified screenshot went viral. It was trending on X, formerly known as Twitter. It was a grab of the live tracking feed of the GDP of all countries. It allegedly belonged to the IMF. That's the International Monetary Fund. Now, at first glance, it looks like any other grab. But when you look closely, you realize why it went viral. It shows India's economy surpassing the $4 trillion mark. The tweet went viral in just hours. Political and business personalities retweeted it. Economists and analysts welcomed it. It was all over social media. They were all lauding India for achieving this feat. But officially, there was pin drop silence. No tweet from the government. No confirmation from the finance ministry. Even the National Statistical Office didn't comment on it. But that viral screen grab was probably fake. India hadn't crossed the mark. It remains quite close to it, though. Currently, India is the world's 5th largest economy. That's after the United States, China, Germany, and Japan. In June, the GDP touched the $3.75 trillion mark. That's according to the Indian Finance Ministry. This is up from $2 trillion in 2014. So the economy is growing, and it's been growing steadily for quite some time. Even during the pandemic and the global economic gloom that followed, India remained resilient, a bright spot in the global economy. So if it's not $4 trillion yet, how far is India from its goal? Well, not too far. According to IMF data, India's GDP will reach $4.2 trillion in the next fiscal year. At this rate of growth, it will still take India 3 years to surpass Japan, that's to become the 4th largest economy. Which brings us to the question, will India become a $5 trillion economy? Well, nominal growth will have to average 9.1% for India to reach this goal by 2027. If that happens, India will surpass Germany as well. That said, there are a list of challenges ahead, and former RBI Governor D. Subbarao spoke about it. He listed 8 main challenges. They were increasing investment, improving productivity, creating jobs, raising agriculture productivity, maintaining macroeconomic stability, managing global megatrends, and improving governance. So that's what stands between India and a $5 trillion economy right now. Right now, the Indian economy is in a good place. It's growing consistently. It's one of the world's major economies, and it's displayed a lot of resilience. So while this viral screenshot turned out to be fake, India's growth story is for real.
Now to the biggest headline from South America. Argentina has voted for a political overhaul. Yesterday, they had the presidential runoff. 2 candidates, polar opposites, went head-to-head. One of them was Sergio Massa, former finance minister and established politician with years of experience and the candidate of the ruling party. The second was Javier Milei, the outsider, the man described as the Argentine Trump. He was the key challenger. Now, as I said, Argentina voted for an overhaul. They chose Javier Milei. He is now the president-elect. He'll take office on the 10th of December, and Argentina will be heading into uncharted territory.
Today, the impoverishing omnipresent state model is over. Today, the idea that the state is a spoils to be shared among politicians and their friends is over. Today, the vision that the victimizers are the victims and the victims are the victimizers is over. Today, we return to the path that made this country great.
Milei has won a decisive victory, and that's an understatement. He's got the widest margin in 40 years. 1983 was when democracy returned to Argentina. No leader since has got such a big victory margin. He's won almost 56% of the vote. His opponent Massa got about 44%. That was a much wider margin than pollsters had predicted. It shows just how popular Milei is, or at least how fed up Argentina was with the ruling party. This country is in a full-blown economic crisis. It's been facing triple-digit inflation. 143% was the last official count. 143% inflation. The country's foreign reserves have dried up. Argentina owes $44 billion to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. $44 billion, that's part of a bailout program. A program that is failing to bring Argentina back from the brink. The country has been in dire straits for years now, and many of those worst years were overseen by the outgoing government, so you can imagine the public anger. Let me give you some context here. Massa was from the Justicialist Party. It's been in power for most of Argentina's post-dictatorship years. The party's ideology is called Peronism. It's a blend of populism and nationalism. It was partly inspired by Benito Mussolini's Italian fascism, but more focused on labor reform. Now, Peronism was named after the party's founder, Juan Perón. He won Argentina's presidency 3 times. When he died in 1974, his wife Isabel became president. Then from 2003 to 2015, another husband-wife pair ruled Argentina, the Kirchners. They were also members of the same party, and then in 2019, a Kirchner became vice president. So this party is seen as almost dynastic, and its leaders are blamed for Argentina's economic downfall. Long story short, there was serious anti-incumbency and public anger, and Milei was quick to tap into it. He labeled them a corrupt political caste, and he vowed to eradicate the existing system.
This model of decadence has come to an end. There is no turning back. The results of this model are plain for all to see. From being the richest country in the world, today we are ranked 130. Half of Argentines are poor and the other 10% are destitute. Stop this impoverishing model of the caste. Today we embrace the libertarian model so as to return to being a global power.
How will Milei fix Argentina's problems? He's offered unconventional solutions. You have to listen to this, like shutting their central bank and abolishing their currency, the Argentine peso. He wants to replace it with the US dollar. He also wants to reduce the size and power of the government, to cut the number of ministries from 18 to 8, and to reduce or abolish taxes. Plus, he promises to keep the government out of the people's affairs. It sounds as dramatic as it is. But the people of Argentina have seen so many years of economic management that this is a message that resonates with them, a promise of the system overhaul. Out with the old politics that just weren't working.
I support Javier Milei because I need a change. I want a change for my country that I deeply love. We've been suffering for many years of decadence, and this seemed to me like a good option. No more of the same. Enough with Peronism already. We already know that. We'll see something new with good ideas, and I have high expectations. I hope he doesn't disappoint us and that he does the best for the country.
But will Milei succeed where his predecessors failed? His radical plans for the economy have raised alarms. Critics say it will likely destabilize Argentina further, push it further on the road to collapse. Then there are Milei's other policies which have raised eyebrows. He wants to ban abortion, whatever happened to minimum government interference. He also wants to loosen gun control. He wants to shun ties with Brazil and China. Why? The president-elect says he won't work with communists. Those were his words. Instead, he wants to deepen relations with the US. How does the world see this election? Most leaders have extended common courtesies, including India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, but some of Argentina's neighbors are visibly unimpressed, like Colombian President Gustavo Petro. He posted this, calling Milei's win, and I'm quoting, "sad for Latin America." The fact is, the people of Argentina have chosen this man, and the world will have to live with it. His policies and rhetoric may sound familiar. Think former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro and former US President Donald Trump. Both men, by the way, have congratulated Milei on his victory, and Trump even said that he would, and I'm quoting again, "make Argentina great again." But Milei has an economic catastrophe to deal with in the coming days. Any greatness depends on how he tackles his immediate challenges after taking office. Now let's look at West Africa, at the nation of Mali. For a week now, the country has been celebrating a victory against separatist militants and against terror groups. Last week, Mali's ruling military junta struck a blow. They captured the town of Kidal. It's a regional capital, home to about 25,000 people. It was in separatist hands for almost 7 years. Mali's military had no control there for 7 long years. The government had only symbolic presence. But now, Mali is back in charge, and the people in the capital, Bamako, are celebrating. They're being encouraged by the ruling junta in a simple but effective way, using subsidized football tickets. Our next report explains.
The citizens of Mali are ecstatic. Over the past week, they've been celebrating with song and dance on the streets of the capital, Bamako. Last Tuesday, Mali's ruling junta achieved a massive victory. They captured the rebel stronghold of Kidal, far in the northeast of Mali. After 7 years, Kidal is back under Bamako's control, and Mali's junta is fueling the celebrations. How? By providing cheap football tickets. Mali is fighting to qualify for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. It had a match on Saturday against neighboring Chad. Mali is also playing against the Central African Republic. The junta has cut ticket prices by half for both the matches, and the people love it.
You know, loving a country means loving everything. Whether it's the army, the Eagles of Mali, or any other symbol of the Republic, you can't help but love it. So the army's victory after more than a decade of occupation of the Kidal region was like a push to enable people today to come and support the Eagles, who are going to give us another victory.
Yesterday, the Cadet Eagles won 1-5, and today, the Senior Eagles are playing Chad. The same Chad that rallied behind MINUSMA against Mali in Kidal. God willing, we have them on a golden platter. We are going to beat them on the pitch, just as we did so well in Kidal.
Mali did indeed get another victory. They beat Chad 3-1 in Saturday's qualifier, and that had special meaning to some junta supporters, people who associate Chad with the UN. The junta's victory in Kidal wasn't just seen as a blow to separatists, but also to the UN and France. To understand this, we need to take a deeper look at Mali's situation. The country has been struggling with insurgency for years. On the one hand, you have the separatists, the Tuareg people who wanted to carve out a new country in the north. Their uprising in 2012 had side effects: the emergence of terror groups in Mali, groups aligned with the Al-Qaeda and ISIS. These groups became active in northern Mali about a decade ago and continue their activities in the region. All three factions, Mali's government, the separatists and the terror groups, wanted control of Kidal, and Mali's government has been on the back foot for most of the last decade. In 2014, they lost complete control of Kidal, and Mali partially blames this on the intervention by the UN and the French. A UN mission to help stabilize northern Mali was formed in 2013. It's known by the acronym MINUSMA. France and the UN sent troops to northern Mali, and they've been patrolling the area for years, almost maintaining the status quo. But Mali had had enough. It saw a coup in 2020 and again in 2021, and ever since it's been on a warpath against France and the UN. France ended its joint missions with Mali in 2021, and Mali's junta asked the UN forces to leave this year, which is what triggered the capture of Kidal. The UN forces had bases in the region. When they withdrew on October 31st, the separatists were the first to act. They captured the abandoned MINUSMA bases in Kidal. But Mali's military was ready. They moved their forces in as well. And after 2 weeks of intense fighting, they recaptured Kidal last Tuesday, starting off this wave of celebrations.
The fact that the army has been able to recapture Kidal is an immense joy. This is just the beginning. We're going to flush them out and take back the whole of Mali.
The people are celebrating, egged on by the junta and their cheap football tickets. But the real question is this a turning point for Mali in its fight against insurgency? We'll find out in the days to come.
If you're an Indian, Sunday was tough for you. Team India lost the ICC Cricket World Cup final. It was a major upset. India had won 10 matches on the trot, even beaten eventual champions Australia in the group stages. But yesterday was not to be. I guess that's sport. In fact, the World Cup campaign slogan sums it up best. It takes one day. And Sunday was Australia's day. But let's not cling on to the disappointment. Let's look beyond the cricket. What did this World Cup do for India? Mainly two things. Number one, offer multiple lessons on hosting big events. And number two, cement India's place as the powerhouse of global cricket. Let's go one by one. Hosting a World Cup involves a lot of logistics. Matches were held in 10 cities. They were spread across the length and breadth of the country. And was it perfect? Well, maybe the atmosphere was, but the fan experience, certainly not. The ticketing system was a mess from day one. Fans accused the Indian Cricket Board of hoarding tickets. And maybe they had a point. Sunday's final was attended by around 90,000 people. That was the official attendance, 90,000. What was the capacity of the Ahmedabad Stadium? More than 130,000. So where did the remaining tickets go? Such questions will have to be answered. There needs to be transparency and trust because India's ambitions are not limited to cricket alone. The government wants to bid for the 2036 Olympics. It promises to be a historic bid. It also means more scrutiny, more expectations from fans around the world, which is why this World Cup is a learning curve. How to manage tickets, how to build and prepare infrastructure, and how to put on a show. Takeaway number 2 was India's cricket superpowerdom. It was on full display since last month. Let's look at the viewership first. The final numbers are yet to be published, but after 35 games, the TV viewership was 500 million. 35 out of 48 games, 500 million. To give you some context, in 2019, the overall viewership was 509 million. So this year's final tally will be much bigger. According to the ICC, maybe twice. Same with digital viewing. Yesterday's final logged 5.9 crore online viewers. Just imagine that, 59 million users. If every screen had 2 viewers, that's 120 million people. It's a record on the streaming platform. In fact, Australia's total population is just 27 million, gives you an idea. So data says interest is increasing. Maybe not in stadiums, but certainly on television. And that's good for the game. The World Cup also gave a boost to the national economy. Reports say by around $2.4 billion. Again, this is good for the game too. Because unless there is tangible benefit, why would any country host? So put together, the picture is quite clear. Cricket remains a major money spinner, and most of that money comes from India. This World Cup was evidence of that. Just think back to the 2011 edition. India hosted and won that tournament. It was a sneak peek into the future of cricket, into an era of cricket that India would dominate. But this World Cup was not a sneak peek. It was a full-throated declaration. As they say, no half measures. You had an air show over the stadium, drone and laser shows, massive dance performances. Only India could have pulled this off. And maybe that's what cricket needs now, more drama, more spectacle, more pomp. So what is the biggest takeaway from this World Cup? That cricket's fate lies in India's hands. They say money makes the world go round. What they don't tell you is that it also makes the world a warmer place, thanks to the 12 wealthiest people on earth, the likes of Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and Michael Dell. These tycoons are not just the world's richest, they also top another list, the list of the biggest contributors to climate change. You see, climate change is a global crisis, but not all of us are to blame for it equally. The 12 wealthiest people in the world produce more greenhouse gas emissions than the annual energy emissions of 2 million homes. That's 12 individuals against 2 million homes. Here's another stunning figure. The richest 1% of humanity is responsible for more carbon emissions than the poorest 66%. Our next report tells you why.
The end of 2023 is near. How many of you have achieved what you set out to? We don't mean to hit a nerve. But if you haven't, you may want to turn to climate change for inspiration. It's achieved milestones beyond imagination. Climate change is absolutely killing it. Unfortunately, quite literally. Climate records have tumbled this year. Sea temperatures are historically high. Antarctic sea ice is worrying low. And every continent is facing extreme weather events. Experts say 2023 is on track to be the hottest year on record. This is a global crisis, and it affects us all. But we aren't equally to blame. So who gets the lion's share of the blame? It's simple, those with the lion's share of the money. According to a report by Oxfam, the uber elite are the biggest contributors to climate change. That's the richest 1% of humanity. The billionaires and millionaires. In numbers, that's 77 million people. They accounted for 16% of all carbon emissions in 2019. That's more than the carbon emissions of the poorest 66% or 5 billion people in 2019. More than the amount generated by all road transport globally in 2019. Enough to cancel out the work of nearly 1 million wind turbines each year. And enough to cause more than 1 million deaths due to heat. This sounds bad. But it gets worse when we look at the richest among the rich, the crème de la crème. The top 12 wealthiest people in the world. They produce more greenhouse gas emissions than the annual energy emissions of 2 million homes. That's 12 people against 2 million homes. This isn't an exercise in public shaming, but purely for clarity. Here are the names. Carlos Slim, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Bernard Arnault, Michael Dell, Roman Abramovich, Larry Ellison, Elon Musk, Eric Schmidt, and Laurene Powell. These 12 names have a wealth of super yachts, private jets, cars, helicopters, palatial mansions, you name it. Together, that results in 17 million tons of carbon dioxide each year. And while Jeff Bezos simply flexes his biceps and wears cowboy hats, Bill Gates writes a book on climate change. Matters don't change. At this point, climate change seems to be a champagne problem. So much so that the image of contributions to climate change resembles a champagne coupe. The top is wide, flat, and shallow. That's the richest 10%. On average, they account for 50% of all emissions. Then comes the narrowing point of the glass. That's the middle 40% of humanity. Their carbon contribution is roughly proportionate to their number. Further down is the long, slim stem. That's the remaining 50% of the world population. Their carbon use tapers along with their incomes. That's the bottom hundreds of millions. They contribute the least to climate change, but they suffer the most. This is the greatest irony of the carbon inequality. Like most things in life, climate change too has a class divide. It would take about 1500 years for someone in the bottom 99% to produce as much carbon as the richest billionaires do in a single year. This is unfair and unacceptable. So, what's the solution? Taxing the rich. Climate experts have repeatedly called for hefty wealth taxes on the super rich. This can reduce inequality and fund transition to renewable energy. According to Oxfam, a 60% tax on incomes of the wealthiest 1% can cut emissions by 695 million tons. That's more than the carbon footprint of the UK in 2019. And this tax can raise over $6 trillion a year. It can help fund the battle against climate change. Because money isn't just making the world go round. It's destroying our planet.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Spain, 170,000 people marched across the country against the Catalan amnesty law. It's one of the largest protests in the history of Spain. In the United States, President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden donned aprons and served Thanksgiving dinners to military personnel. And in Denmark, one of the world's amusement parks has opened for the Christmas season with lights and festive cheer. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1945, the Nuremberg trials began in Germany. 24 high-ranking Nazis went on trial for war crimes during the Second World War. It was the first trial of its kind in history conducted by an international tribunal. 12 of them were later sentenced to death. Leaving you on that note, thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
The 21 survivors of Hitler's Guard make their final pleas before the Allied Tribunal.
Dass ich alles, was geschehen sei, gewusst haben müsse. Kriegszustand mit Deutschland befinden und lediglich ein Waffenstillstand durch bedingungslose Kapitulation.
Das ich bereits zu Beginn des Prozesses Folgendes voraussagte. Erstens.
la libertad. Sí.